going to try something a little different today. What I'm going to do is do the reading and intermix it with my sermon. And to help you with this, what I have done in the few Bibles is actually put a bookmark on that passage that we're going to be going over. And it's 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 15a. So you're free to look at it, you can look at your own Bible, or you can just listen to me because I will be reading all of the words that are in the Bible there for this reading. So, verse 1. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Now this beginning statement for this chapter is a little bit of background of what this story is going to be about. And what has happened is Elijah and the prophets of Baal have come together for a little contest with regard to sacrifices. And Elijah stirs up the crowd, who are mostly people who are proponents of Yahweh, and kind of sends them after the prophets of Baal, and they kill several hundred of those prophets. And this makes, as you might imagine, Ahab the king and Jezebel the queen a little bit angry, because Jezebel is a big proponent of Baal. She's from a foreign country, and she's trying to introduce this faith into Israel, even though the traditional God of Israel has always been Yahweh, our God. In verse 2, then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. And one of them she's talking about is the prophets of Baal who are dead. So basically what she's doing is sending a message to Elijah saying, I am going to have you killed. And by this time tomorrow. So why didn't she just send soldiers and have it done? Why would she warn him about what she was going to do? And it might have been that most of the people in Israel loved God, loved Yahweh, and she did not want to make a martyr of Elijah. So she figured a better way, an easier way to get rid of Elijah. And you'll find out in the next verse what he does. It says, then he was afraid, he got up and fled for his life. He was doing exactly what it was that Jezebel wanted him to do. And I think if I was Elijah, I'd be thinking about doing the same thing with you. And Elijah came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servants there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. Now, to understand what's going on here, you need to know a little bit about the geography of that region at that time. At that time, there were two Jewish states. There was Israel, which was in the north, and then Judah. And below that, the wilderness, which we would call the Sinai Peninsula. So imagine that our friend Elijah has gone all the way through Israel, all the way through Judah, trying to escape this threat from Jezebel, and a day into the desert. He's trying to get away from her, trying to get completely away from civilization, so no one even knows where he is at. And he came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. And why is he saying this, that he's no better than his ancestors? Because his ancestors, the people of Israel, had not always been constant to God, and he is blaming himself for not doing what he should have done. Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, get up and eat. He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. Well, you can imagine by this time, Elijah is pretty worn out. In fact, probably on the point of death, wandering so far, so fast. So God comes to Elijah and saves him in a practical way, sending an angel. I know a couple of months ago, Sam gave a sermon on the angels in our midst, right? So these angels might have been the actual people that he sent by to leave something to eat for Elijah. And then the 7th verse, we find out that the angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him and said, "Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you." He got up and ate and drank. He was so weary. And God here is coming to help him in a practical way. And then he went in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. Horeb, the Mount of God. Now, you're probably thinking, why is this the Mount of God? Most of you might not have even heard of Mount Horeb before, but you probably heard of Mount Sinai. And Sinai and Horeb are both the same place. And that's why we get this, him going to Mount Horeb and the Mount of God. And if you think about the past, why are they calling this the Mount of God? It's because when Moses saw the burning bush, it was there at Mount Sinai. When he got the 10 Commandments for the people of Israel fleeing slavery from Egypt, it was there on Mount Sinai. This is a place where there is a palpable presence of God. That's what he knows. And so he finally gets to the Mount of God, Sinai or Horeb, however you want to pronounce it. And at that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Now in this region, caves are very numerous. And part of the reason is during the Stone Age, it was a lot easier to carve a hole in the side of a mountain or a hill for your abode rather than build something freestanding. So there were caves pockmarked all over the region. And then while he's there, he spends the night. So God comes to him in a dream. Then the word of the Lord came to him saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Now God knows what he's doing there. God knows everything, right? When he's asking this question, he's not asking because he wants to know. He is trying to tell Elijah something. And I can imagine him not asking the question like, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He's like, "What in the world are you doing here, Elijah? I made you prophet of Israel. You should be up there. You should be doing your job. And here you are running away from what you are supposed to be doing." He answered. And this is Elijah's answer. Verse 10. "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Whew. That sounds pretty ominous. I wouldn't want that happening to me either. But when you're reading this, isn't there just a little note of self-justification? Just that little note of whining. It's like, "Oh, I couldn't do it, Lord. I couldn't do it because it was just too tough. There were too many things happening. I could have died doing it." But the Lord had appointed him to do that job. So God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." The Lord is about to pass by. Now this is kind of an interesting idea because he's already talking to Elijah in the dream, but God is going to give Elijah what he wants, the palpable presence of God. But we know God is everywhere, right? God is outside, God is in the sky, God is in wherever we go, God is with us. We could pray to God at any moment. But Elijah needs, that connection. Just like we need that connection. And when we want to go to God, when we feel like we need God's presence, where do we go? Where do we come, I should say? We come into the sanctuary at church to hear the word, to feel closer to God. And that is what Elijah is looking for at this point. Now comes one of the most famous scenes in the Old Testament. Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting the mountains and breaking the rocks in pieces before the Lord. A windstorm so powerful, making all this noise, rocks flying in the air, things rushing around. I have experienced myself some heavy winds. I'm sure you all have. At one point I was walking down the street, and I was amazed to hear this cracking across the street, and this tree goes, knocks right over. Winds so powerful, it can knock down a tree with a trunk this big, a trunk this big. I'm sure you've seen roots uprooted standing in the air. This is the power of God. Power, raw power that he is seeing at this time, and chaos. But then the next part of the verse goes, but the Lord was not in the wind, because God wasn't talking to him through the wind. So what do you think Elijah's thinking of this? It's just scaring the living daylights out of him. And then after the wind, an earthquake. An earthquake. Have any of you ever experienced an earthquake? I know some of you have, because we talked about it in the Bible study on Thursday. And I have been in an earthquake myself. And it was, my wife and I lived in Seattle for about 10 years. And she had taken my daughter, Katrina, to ballet class. This is my opportunity to embarrass her in public again. She's just a little girl in a tutu, so it was cute. So she takes my daughter to dance class, and I stayed home. I was working on my computer up in my study, and Paul was about 6 months old, and he's in his crib. And I'm working away, and all of a sudden, I felt this jolt. And I thought the first thing that went through my mind is someone had driven a pickup truck through my front yard and drove it into my living room. And so my office was right above the living room, so I got up and I looked down outside to see if I could see a tailgate sticking out of the side of my house. But no, it wasn't. And the ground kept shaking, and I knew what it was at that moment. It took me a little to figure it out. And so I went and grabbed Paul, ran down the stairs, and the stairs were shaking so much that they were like water under my feet. And finally, I got outside with Paul and finally felt at least a little bit safer. So when you go through an experience like that, you start to question even the ground under your feet, the stability of that. You know there's raw power out there that you have no control over. That was the earthquake. But we find out when Elijah went through all that God is not in the earthquake. And then we move on. After the earthquake, fire. And you know fire. You've seen pictures and video on TV of fires raging across California. It gets to a house and poof, a house just explodes, a whole house. A whole fire is thousands of acres going down all at once. And if you want a different image, think of this. When you're driving down the road, it's just a little spark. Just a little spark in your piston that's driving you down the road at 75 miles per hour on the highway. That's how powerful fire is. And this is what Elijah is experiencing. The power of fire. But God is not in the fire. So where is the Lord then? And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. Because the whisper that is about to come can only be heard in the sound, through the sound of silence. In verse 13, when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance to the cave. So why do you think that Elijah might have veiled himself? Because he he believed that if he saw God, it could kill him, if not blind him. One of those two things. Because if you think about the rationale at that time period, what is the most powerful thing they knew of? The sun. Have you ever tried staring at the sun? Yeah, you don't want to do it because it'll make you go blind. So he's thinking, hey, here's something even more powerful than the sun. I better veil myself from it. So he's leaving, he gets to the edge of the cave. This protection, what little protection it provides against all of this wind and storm. And then there came a voice that said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Wait a minute. Isn't that the same question that he was asked in the dream? What are you doing here, Elijah? What in the world are you doing here? And then Elijah makes his answer in verse 14. He answered, I have been zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. Was anything funny about that passage? It's the same thing he said when God asked him that same question the first time. What does that tell you about Elijah? He didn't learn anything from watching the fire, from feeling the earthquake, from seeing the wind. None of that meant anything. That wasn't what was important. Then the Lord said to him in verse 15, go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael as king over Aram. And then he says, go anoint this guy over king of Israel. And then he says, go find your replacement, who's going to be Elisha. What? It's funny. I mean, it goes from all of this magnificent stuff to something that's practical. Because that's what God is. God is practical if God is nothing else. God has all of that power. But what is he going to tell you ultimately? What is the right thing to do? So this passage operates on two levels. First we have the chaos versus the quiet. You can't hear God until the chaos clears. All these forces controlled by God, all this power, and God chooses not to act through the power, but through the people. Because it's all about relationships. And then God gives us practical advice, speaks to us through prayer, through meditation, through our consciences, the Spirit, the Bible, other people, those angels in our midst, as Sam would tell us. So it is all about relationships. And so as you face the chaos, the disorder, and the problems of this world, remember that God has given you a mission, just as God gave Elijah a mission, to be in relation with others and to bring God's message into the world. Like Elijah, we may run from our responsibilities, but God will always send us back again. And if we just listen, we will get all of the comfort, all of the love, all of the support, and all of the instruction that we need to continue to be and do all that God would have us be and do. Please put yourselves in a posture for prayer. God of earth, wind, and fires, you are the mover of all things. Your power is beyond the scope of our imagining, and so it infuses us with wonder and amazement. But you are also a practical God. You come to us in our tiny lives, and when we let you in, you sort out our problems, revealing to us what we must do to live a good, honest, and fulfilling life. Lord, in the chaos that surrounds us, we have difficulty clearing that away and making time to listen to your words, time to listen to that still, small voice that brings us comfort, hope, and love. Amen.